From South Carolina Public Radio, this is the South Carolina Lede. I'm your host, Gavin Jackson, and this episode was recorded on March 17th, 2025, St. Patrick's Day. That's right, from right here in South Carolina Public Radio Studios here in Columbia. May the luck of the Irish be with you always.
We love you.
And also with you. On this episode of The Lede, we're looking at the state of scDOT and catching you up on some of the major things happening at the agency and in our growing state. We preview the week ahead with all eyes on what is set to happen with S-244, the major tort reform bill, especially on Tuesday, which is D-Day, as they say. Senator Lindsey and Congressman Jim Clyburn hit the Sunday shows, and dare I say, we have a 2028 watch in this episode.
2028 watch?
Yeah, 2028 watch. Just a little, I know it's so early. Stay tuned. The Lede loves hearing from everyone. That's why we have a voicemail box set up at 803-563-7169 where you can talk about things like pie, etc. We got some pie hot takes in the wind down section, but we don't have to keep talking about pie because I think we're all going to agree that we like it, except some people. That's okay. 803-563-7169. Give us a shout. Let us know what's on your mind. Are you sneezing? Are you wheezing? Because the allergies are here. Let's look at what's on tap this week in the State House, where the Senate is in and the House is in perfunctory session, which means they will not be having any floor action, but we'll have a few committee meetings as well as the Senate. Up in Congress, the House and Senate are off this week, so take a break. You get the government funded, you take a week off. Looking at the economic calendar, the Federal Open Market Committee meets on Tuesday and Wednesday with comments from Fed Chair Jay Powell on Wednesdays. So we're going to see if there's any rate cuts in our future. Probably not. And that brings me to our Sunday shows. Senator Lindsey was on CBS News' Face the Nation, where moderator Margaret Brennan asked him not much about domestic policy, but rather the latest moves with Ukraine and Russia as ceasefire deals continue to be discussed. Brennan asked Graham if Russian President Vladimir Putin was playing for time and playing President Donald Trump, with the two set to have a call on Tuesday.
I don't know yet, but I do know you play President Trump at your own peril. What Trump did to get Ukraine at the table was tough, and it worked. So if Putin is sincere about wanting peace, accept the ceasefire on the same terms as Ukraine and quit trying to mix the two, ceasefire and peace deal. What I would advise the Trump administration to do is to tell Putin, are you going to accept the ceasefire on the same terms as Ukraine or not? If you're not, go back to maximum pressure. I have legislation that will overwhelmingly pass the United States Senate that will crush the Russian economy, and I'm willing to move forward if I have to. But we're talking about ceasefire, and we're talking about peace. We weren't talking about that in the last administration. But to me, Putin's a predator. The best way to judge Putin is not in a 3-hour meeting, but 30 years of action. And I see no indication that he's going to stop being a predator against Ukraine until the pain is too large. If he refuses to cease fire, that tells me all I need to know.
Do you think Vladimir Putin benefits from the U.S. decision to try to shutter some of the advocates for the free press and agents of the free press, like Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Asia, and Voice of America? As you know, there was an executive order to try to dismantle them. Yeah, I don't know what value these ideas have in the 21st century. At the end of the day, I'll look and evaluate where the Voice of America really is. Radio Free Europe, I know it made a difference in the Cold War. People told us that. So that's something to consider. Is it still worth the price? But I like the idea of putting bad guys on their back foot and giving people hope.
Senator Graham wasn't the only member of our 9-member congressional delegation to be on a Sunday show. The lone Democrat, Congressman Jim Clyburn of the 6th Congressional District, was on MSNBC's The Weekend, where he was asked about the continuing resolution fallout from last week in which House Democrats voted against the CR, which prevented a government shutdown after House Republicans were whipped into line by President Trump. And 10 Senate Democrats, including Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, voted with Senate Republicans to do the same. Here's Clyburn.
I don't know. I thought the Senate was on board. If you remember when Leader Schumer announced that the votes were not there, I thought that this was the time for the whole country to focus on exactly who was where. When I saw the numbers, 22% of the American people said Trump was responsible. Around 31% said the Republicans were responsible. Add that up. I'm not good in math, but that's over 50% of the American people blaming the Republicans. Let's keep the focus on them for 24, 48 hours, if need be, and let the country see exactly who is doing this and talk about these guardrails that were not there. Because what we're doing here, irrespective of what's in this bill, we've got an administration that's decided that they're going to do what they darn well please, irrespective of what anybody else says, including the courts. And so let's help the American people, help them focus on exactly who is doing what. And if we had done that for about 24, 48 hours, I think we'd be in a better place today. Hakeem Jeffries did a great job bringing the House Democrats together. All but one voted to not give a blank check to this president. And then it goes to the Senate for the first 24 hours. They seem to be on board, and then all of a sudden, there's this change. What happened in the 24-hour period, I'm not sure. But nobody should be blaming Hakeem Jeffries for that. So when I say, you see people saying, well, we need new leadership. Jeffries played it by the rules. He played the game the way it ought to be played, and somehow he got blindsided.
Clyburn was also asked about the Trump administration using the Alien Enemies Act, which hasn't been invoked since World War II and was the way that Japanese Americans were interred in camps in our country, among other actions that the administration has taken recently. Here's Clyburn.
I think that we have to be very, very careful. You talk about that act, it was used against Japanese and other Asians, and we see a Supreme Court that is, for some reason, I've been reading these cases coming out on voting and these cases on immunity. And, you go back and read the slaughterhouse cases, you read those cases coming out of the Civil War that gave us Jim Crow, and you see eerily similar language and spirit. And that's what has me really stand up at night, because this Supreme Court seems to be focused on times gone by. How do we give complete immunity to a president of the United States and think he's not going to use it time and time again, thinking he's going to get back to you and he's going to still have his decisions in his favor? That's what's going on here. I hope that these trial judges at the district level and these hopefully all except maybe one or two of our circuit courts will hold the line, because the Supreme Court seems not to be willing to hold the line on these things and to continue our pursuit of a more perfect union.
Let's go to the State House this week, where in the Senate, all eyes will be on S-244, the major tort reform legislation that is the center of many backroom deals that have fallen through in consternation among lawmakers as millions of dollars pour in from all sides of the debate. In fact, I was celebrating St. Pat's and people were talking to me about tort reform. Yes, it is everywhere, folks. Now, will this bill survive? Well, we will find out on D-Day, which is what Senate Majority Leader Shane Massey, who's also the bill's sponsor, said is on Tuesday. If the bill remains at an impasse, the House-approved H. 3497 liquor liability bill would likely come into play. So don't worry, that one's waiting in the wings, and that's one that a lot of folks are really focused on. But let's look at some Senate committee meetings this week. On Tuesday, the full Senate Finance Committee will hear from Revenue and Fiscal Affairs Director Frank Rainwater on tax revenue, as the Finance Committee now will craft its version of that House-approved $14.5 billion budget. The committee will take up several other bills, including H. 3430, which would make the state auditor a position appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate, instead of being appointed by the State Fiscal Accountability Authority, SVAT to friends. On Thursday, Department of Public Health Acting Director Dr. Edward Simmer is before the Senate Medical Affairs Committee after being appointed by the governor to continue in this role. This is part of his appointment process, and Simmer was the third leader of DHEC during the COVID pandemic and successfully navigated the agency through it, though hardline conservatives in the House and Senate pushed back against Simmer and his opposition to some legislation that would limit the agency's ability to contain a future pandemic, a move that the governor also supported. Over in the House, like we said, it's in perfunctory session. That's a fun word to say this week, meaning it will only hold committee meetings and there will be no floor activity. This, of course, comes on the heels of that budget being passed last week. Committee meetings we'll be watching include a education subcommittee meeting on bills including H 3264, which would establish a pilot program on media literacy and critical thinking, as well as H 3578, which would require cursive writing be taught in 2nd through 5th grade. You know, the loop-de-loops.
Interesting.
You guys still write in cursive? Let me know. 803-563-7169. You're going to say, I only write in cursive, Gavin. Gen Z kids will say, what is handwriting? With so much ongoing transportation infrastructure construction happening across our state, we like to say that it's always infrastructure week here.
Yes.
That's because thanks to the 12-cent gas tax increase approved by the legislature phased in beginning in 2017, there is much more money to fix problems that have plagued the state for years. And we're talking about much more money. We're talking about $4.7 billion since July 1st, 2017. That's additional coming in with that gas tax increase, which has let the agency drastically increase construction to the tune of $6.5 billion in contracts. And it's also helped lock down federal matching funds as well. A lot of road work. scDOT has received $900 million in one-time dollars as well over the last 3 budget years, and stands to receive another $200 million to expedite bridge repairs in this budget. So money is going to the scDOT. Now, while this is substantial, scDOT Secretary and lead listener Justin Powell told the Senate Transportation Committee on March 5th that more needs to be done to keep up with the demands of a growing population, the ports, and the state overall.
And while the General Assembly has wisely allocated those dollars to the Infrastructure Maintenance Trust Fund, they are protected and reserved mostly for projects, paving and safety projects largely. The 16-cent gas tax, that original gas tax, goes into our highway fund. And that is how we pay for our field maintenance. It pays for a little bit of our federal match. But what has been consistent over the past 7 years is that amount of money has remained flat over that time. Now, when you add in the inflation that the highway construction industry has seen over the past several years, and I have the highway cost index up here from the Federal Highway Administration, our buying power has significantly eroded over the past 3 years. Living within our budget means we push out fewer projects. In 2022, which was the first full year of the gas tax rate being at 28.75 cents, we were able to push out over 1,100 miles of paving projects across South Carolina. In 2024, with essentially the same paving budget, we've been able to push out 727 miles of paving projects. Simply put, our dollar just doesn't go as far as it used to. And part of that is the inflation that we've seen in our household budgets and our business budgets, is we've seen an increased cost in labor, materials, and shipping. But a big part of it is that the gas tax simply just doesn't buy as much as it used to, even with rapid population growth and increasing prices. Part of that is from people buying new cars that get another mile or 2 mile per gallon. But another big part of it is that as people make the transition from fueling on gallons of gasoline to fueling on kilowatt hours of electricity, we will see this situation worsen.
For some background, Powell was appointed by the scDOT Commission last January and was confirmed by the state Senate in April 2024, replacing his predecessor, Secretary Christy Hall, whose vision got the gas tax passed, turned the massive agency around, and kicked things into overdrive with that 10-year plan for pavements, roads, bridges, and more. In fact, since 2017, 1,100 miles of rural roads have been made safer, nearly 9,500 miles of roads have been resurfaced, 370 bridges have been rehabilitated or rebuilt, and there is work underway on nearly every interstate in the state, with more to come. Now, Powell has also overseen a very busy first year, especially with those ramifications from Hurricane Helene that hit the state, leading to a lot of trees down, a lot of debris, and so many other problems that they've navigated. But now the attention turns to the next statewide transportation infrastructure plan, which is Momentum 2050. This will be before the scDOT Commission this week, in fact. But that 10-year plan, the original 10-year plan that started in 2017, that was dubbed more of a repair plan, where this 2050 plan will continue to upgrade the system and increase interstate investment while working closely on urban and rural mobility challenges and multimodal needs. Think freight, commerce, and ports. Here's Secretary Powell.
But at its core, the 2017 roads bill was a repair bill. In the intervening 8 years, South Carolina has changed. People have discovered what we've all known our entire lives, that South Carolina is a great place to raise a family, to open a business, and to retire. There are benefits to that growth, but there are some very real challenges that come from it as well. The reality is that we all know is that growth isn't coming, it's here, and it is likely to stay for the foreseeable future. By owning half of the roads owned in South Carolina, public roads owned in South Carolina, DOT ultimately gets the biggest complaint that comes out of those roads: traffic. Yet in the big picture, we don't make land use decisions about how development occurs in the state. While we do have a role to play in the encroachment permit process, we are mostly focused on the safe and efficient operation of traffic. The General Assembly has decided that local governments decide land use and that they decide how their communities should look and grow. And I think that's the appropriate decision to make. But that traffic that comes from those local land use decisions is ultimately borne by scDOT at the end of the day. Over the past year, we are required by law to prepare every 5 years, a long-range transportation plan, and we will be rolling that out next month, called Momentum 2050. I wanted to share some of the statistics that are informing our plan. Residents are already feeling the impacts of this growth. As part of Momentum 2050, we conducted surveys across South Carolina on transportation issues and their needs across the state. We received over 6,000 responses. When asked what their number one transportation issue was, congestion and delay topped condition of the roads, adding to freight, expanding transit service, or adding bike and pedestrian amenities. Perception is also reality. When we measure the amount of congestion on our roads, we have seen the amount of miles traveled across South Carolina increase, particularly in our fastest growing areas in the upstate and the low country. It isn't in your head. There are more cars traveling more miles on roughly the same number of lane miles that we've had for the past several years. There's simply more traffic out there.
Another challenge, of course, is funding, which this plan will make the case for more of in the future, especially as inflation and gas tax fees and EV adoption take chomps out of the revenue coming in. For example, the average driver with a gas vehicle spends $200 a year in gas taxes compared to the $60 EV fee that users pay every year. But I know folks also want to know more about federal funding and that conversation we've been hearing about in terms of federal funds being frozen in some situations. Think DOJ, think DEI issues, a lot of concerns over federal funding. But Powell said this last week before his Senate Finance Subcommittee when Columbia Democratic Senator Darrell Jackson asked him about federal money.
Our bread and butter funding that we get for road projects has continued uninterrupted. The only thing that has been paused has been the electric vehicle charging infrastructure money that had been part of the 2021 infrastructure bill. They put a pause on that. We had not gotten very far in. We were just about to initiate our procurement, so it didn't put us in any financial lurch from there. The other thing going on, we had 2 large discretionary grants we received. It's customary, and this occurred between Trump to Biden, so we're expecting it to happen again between Biden and Trump. They usually review those discretionary grants before they let us sign the grant agreements with them, and so that we're working on that to make sure that gets done. Kind of on the federal level, we are up for reauthorization, so our federal reauthorization is up in 2026, so that discussion will be happening. I actually co-authored a letter with 5 other DOT secretaries really kind of advocating about how this administration and the federal program can best work for states like South Carolina. So I'm happy to share that with the committee as well.
So on the grants, can you be specific? Are those grants for specific projects that you're looking at? Could you tell us what those projects are? Yes, sir. It's a $175 million grant for the replacing the Lake Marion Bridge over on I-95. And then the reconstruction of the Long Point Road interchange in Mount Pleasant, which feeds into the port. Right. And so there'd been no action on those yet?
No action to sign the grant agreements, and we're working to move those along so that we can proceed with those projects.
Moving on, I know I'm usually talking to you guys about things that are moving and grooving at the State House, and then there are some legislative issues that a lot of people want to see move and groove, but due to the demographic makeup of both chambers, it's not going to be the case. And some legislation that we're talking about right now is that Charleston loophole. It's like we've talked about for years and years, and we are 3 months away from the 10-year anniversary of that hate-fueled massacre of 9 black parishioners at the hands of a white supremacist at Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston. Now, the group Moms Demand Action, which calls for sensible gun reforms, held a rally outside of the State House on Thursday, calling for lawmakers to close the Charleston loophole in state law. Charleston Democratic Senator Dion Tedder spoke at the press conference, along with Columbia Democratic Senator Tamika Isaac Devine and Columbia Democratic Representative Hamilton Grant, among others. But here's Tedder explaining the Charleston loophole.
So currently under law, what happens is if a person goes to purchase a firearm and the background check is delayed for some reason, it has not come back, it has not cleared. If that background check is not come back within 3 days, the seller can sell that weapon. Regardless of if on the 5th day it comes back and it's flagged that this person should not be able to purchase a firearm. That is the Charleston loophole. I filed legislation the beginning of this session to change that. It's imperative that we do that. That is a horrible thing, and that is what happened with Dylan Roof in Charleston. That is exactly what happens. And so just think about that. In 3 days, if you apply for a weapon and the background check does not come back cleared yet, as long as 3 days have passed, you're allowed to still sell that weapon. That is ridiculous. And so those are the type of laws that we need to change in our state. It's common sense gun legislation. And so we're working together, Senator Devine and I, to push things like that, safety, storage. And so we appreciate Moms Demand Action and all the advocacy groups surrounding us, because we will continue to push this, and I will continue to fight to get a hearing on that bill so that we can close the Charleston loophole.
Representative Grant brought up several bills that he was against, specifically, ones letting students carry guns on college campuses and teachers being able to carry in schools, when in fact we're funding SROs for every public school in the state, so that should offset that need to carry. Instead, he called for support on bills that he calls more common sense, like higher penalties for folks that don't safely store their firearms, which is something that law enforcement continues to call for. And Grant also mentioned his wife's grandfather, Reverend Dan Simmons Sr., who was one of the 9 killed at Mother Emanuel on June 17, 2015.
I think that we should support House Bill 3587, which would create the offense of criminally negligent storage of a firearm. There's also another House Bill, 3596, better known as the Kingston Act, which would add stiff penalties for guns accessed by children due to unsecured firearms or the use of firearms by a child unsupervised. And lastly, I think we should support House Bill 3868, which would expand criminal background checks and close the Charleston loophole, the same loophole that allowed a white supremacist with a felony to purchase a gun and slaughter so many beautiful people. In closing, when I took this oath of office to represent my district in this state, I did so by placing my hands on this blue Bible. This is the same blue Bible that Reverend Daniel Simmons had open to Mark chapter 4 during Bible study that warm June night in Charleston. 10 years later, you can still see the bloodstains forever etched in the sacred text as it is a reminder of the pure evil that took place that night. Let this Bible serve as an example of the resilience and a reminder that something pure and good can endure something so evil, but yet still produce optimism.
Gun reform legislation has really gone nowhere in the state, while laws for carrying guns have been expanded and training is no longer necessary to carry. And on the way out, I have a little campaign trail bite for you. A little something to take with you. It's our first 2028 watch.
2028 watch?
It's so new. I didn't even know we had a sound effect for it. We don't even have a full-blown 2026 race going on yet, but we're talking some of the little ripples, some of the little underpinnings that happen in our state since we're such a big player when it comes to the primary calendar for presidential campaigns. So we're going to start seeing these people trickle through who might be considering runs in 2028, which I say all that to say on April 14th, Steve Bannon, the former chief White House strategist and senior advisor to President Trump in 2017 and founder of War Room on Real America's Voice, will be the featured speaker at the Greenville County Republican Convention. Embattled Treasurer Curtis Loftus will also give remarks at the convention as well. Now, outgoing Greenville County Chair Yvonne Julian said in a statement, quote, after the historic re-election of President Trump, it was not surprising to see the massive influx of Trump supporters turn out at this year's reorganization. We now have a body of precinct leaders who reflect the MAGA and Doge values here in the upstate and who realize their voices matter at the local level. So we will try and get up there on April 14th. I know I will be out of town for the Easter holiday, but we will do our best to bring you those comments from Steve Bannon. Welcome to the wind down section, our little break from the news. We're glad you're here. A.T. Shire, lead podcast producer, is also here with us,
here
folks.
I am, yes.
You can hear him. He's here.
Yes, thank you.
That's how they're doing it.
I got to say, it is St. Patrick's Day, but because we celebrated on Saturday, I forgot to wear green today. And this is coming from a man with a vast green arsenal of clothes in his house.
You have some green.
I don't.
Isn't the lettering green on you?
No, it's gray. It's pure gray.
What about your shoes? Did you have
shoes?
Eagle
Are green.
Okay,
shoes
so
are green.
I didn't. I'm not
that was by accident.
I'm not allowed to pinch anymore, so I'm not going to.
Well, Gavin, pinch me. We got a caller. Okay.
Goodness gracious.
That's right.
Look at the Irish strikes again.
Gavin, are you ready for this one?
Yes.
Okay, let's hit it.
Let's hit it.
Hey, AT and Gavin, love the voicemail message. That is great. This is Mark calling from Greenville. I must be triggered or activated by your food comments because back when it was is it a sandwich? That was the last thing I called about. Well, now you went on Pie Day, which I love that day, but I didn't hear any mention of meat pies. Meat pies are an amazing version of pie that need more space, need more mention. I went on a year of making a meat pie a month for my family. They love it. So I'm going to be making, I made a meat pie earlier, not in honor of Pie Day, but one of our kids is now plant-based. So I'm making a meatless meat pie in honor of Pie Day. And it is remarkably delicious. So love that the Maine blueberry pie got referenced, but also just wanted to have a shout out to meat pies and all savory pies.
Mark from #YeahThatGreenville, thank you for calling and representing the savory pies.
I love that you're a food-related Manchurian candidate where whenever we talk about it, you're like, no, I'm too triggered. I've been activated. I must call in. And I think that you're right. Meat pies are great, okay? I love a Middle Eastern meat pie. I love like an empanada, like a hand pie.
Okay,
you know what I mean?
They're a Hot Pocket.
A Hot Pocket, I think,
a calzone
is a pie. Yeah, a calzone.
Our next big,
I think it's a hand pie. Hand pies, right? I think that those count, you know?
I'm hungry now.
And those are great. The ones that I don't love are like the British ones.
The mincemeat pie.
The Brits, they just got food all sort of wrong, you know?
They really did.
Like beans on bread.
You're telling me you guys were like over the entire world for how many hundreds of years?
Eating beans on toast.
And this is how you did it?
Yeah,
come on.
Eating the wrongest breakfast you can.
The mincemeat pie.
Yeah, it's so weird.
Funny enough.
Funny enough.
So I wake up like I do.
Let me tell you,
every
folks,
day.
I woke up.
And it's Saturday, right? So I'm getting ready for St. Pat's, and I get a text message on my cell phone from one of our listeners who is in this episode, Secretary Justin Powell.
He's a listener.
And he says, and he has a couple takes here and also answered one of our previous callers' questions.
I just want to point this out right here, Gavin, before you get to what he said. The episodes come out on Saturdays. You're waking up Saturday. He's already listened and answered, okay?
On top of
we have our voice to the ears of the leaders of the state, okay?
Yeah.
They are listeners. If you need questions answered, Come on.
I mean, my road has recently been paved. Your road got paved. No, just kidding.
My road hasn't. I don't want them
the
to.
The street over from me has, though, because they did a lot of utility work, but still. So
but anyway, we got, Gavin got this text.
Secretary Powell's walking, and, great time to listen to our podcast, Saturday Strolls. First one, before we get into the other call.
Saturday Strut.
He said, number one, pie is life. There are no bad pies.
That's wrong.
Rhubarb.
I'm just going to say rhubarb.
Well, he says except strawberry rhubarb.
Thank you.
So we're talking about those 2 cypress trees in the median on I-26.
Yes, this is another caller from Pickens had the question about
If you guys listened to the last episode, that was a question here. And they are known as the lone tree and the homie tree, which you can find on Google Maps.
Fun.
A few years ago, I'm just reading directly, I don't think he cares, we had some folks passionately advocate to keep those trees while we do a rehabilitation project that is currently underway. The trees aren't going to be affected in that project. As we get into the widening of I-26 between Columbia and Charleston, that section will be among the last to be widened. It is in the early stages of design, and the team is looking at ways to advance the widening and keep the trees.
We're trying.
Okay,
that's
folks,
what I'm hearing. We're trying
to keep the trees,
but it's not.
It's tricky. Trees are tricky.
The roads need to be wide, folks.
Look at those. I mean, look at those giant oak trees and all that stuff in the Low Country too. But it's also fascinating because I said, we'll look into it more when we get closer to it because I'm sure our caller from Pickens isn't the only one interested in this.
Sure, it's on Google Maps.
And so we were talking, and he said there's a lot of interesting things in that median. We had to do an archaeological dig recently when we discovered some graves in the section we are about to widen next.
Oh,
so
wow.
They're
that is
always,
interesting.
I mean, they're always digging things. I mean, you're messing things around. You're messing with things. Like, you're going to find things.
Truer words have never been spoken, Gavin.
Do I get to keep the bones? So that's probably a bigger story. We should probably do a fun feature on that, too.
On the bones of South Carolina.
I was drinking milk over the weekend, so maybe I'm going to get back into milk.
Well,
I have
you
to
got
confess,
strong bones and teeth.
Speaking of dairy, these aren't my real teeth.
Well, naturally, no, of course not.
No, I mean, if you still have your real teeth, what are you doing? I'm just kidding.
What are you doing?
I'm doing milk. No, I had to get some milk to make some biscuits the other day because I'm a biscuit fiend.
That's buttermilk, then.
Yeah, but I made my own buttermilk. You put some lemon juice in there. I don't want to buy I just want to just buy.
Sure.
So I was like, let me get some of this milk. I'm not going to go buy a gallon of milk. I'm not that crazy. But I have been buying eggs again.
That's great.
I know, but I never
stopped. I'll admit, I never stopped.
I just can't bring myself to do it, but I need them for my breakfast sandwiches, my biscuits with this.
Yeah, it's part of it's a foundational part of your slop.
But it's just I need $6.
It's not
$7. I need to get back down to $3, then I can be like, oh, everything's fine.
Then you're doubling up. You'll buy $6 worth of $3 eggs, but you won't buy a single $6 egg. Sure, totally. I get it. I get it.
Listen, it's difficult. Okay, times are difficult, so we're trying to make the best of it. And now I'm getting the brown eggs too because I'm going to spend that much money.
Of course,
I'm gonna get good stuff.
Of course.
And my grass-fed butter, my Kerrygold. So
here we go, folks. These are the little secrets you read between Gavin's words. You read between the lines.
I'm going really more organic everything because I'm also terrified of glyphosate. So yeah, that's just something I'm just personally doing.
Gavin, who am I to say don't get your wellness out there, okay?
You guys
spread
don't have
the wellness.
To do it, but grass-fed's where you want to go,
okay,
folks.
Thank you, callers. Thank you, listeners. Thank you.
Hopefully we got some answers for your questions.
Exactly.
Hopefully, if you are another agency head, call in. Let us know that maybe.
What are you saving? What bones are you finding? Okay, tell us about your bones, please. Whatever you're finding in the ground, call before you dig. Okay,
call Miss Utility before you dig. Folks.
Call
That's
us before you dig. Okay. Anyway, Gavin, I'm digging this.
Before you dig,
over.
803-563-7169. Let us know what you're digging up. You might just get on the pod like Mark from #YeahThatGreenville, and we thank you all for listening. You can always leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you don't want to call and use your voice on the podcast. That's okay. It's okay. But we would love your hot takes. You can always stay up to date with the latest news on scetv.org and southcarolinapublicradio.org. And don't forget to support your local newspapers. The South Carolina Lede is a production of South Carolina Public Radio. Our producer is A.T. Shire. Amy Crouch is our supervising producer. Sean Birch is our executive producer. This podcast is produced with support from PRX and is made possible in part by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, as well as listener contributions to the ETV Endowment of South Carolina. For the South Carolina Lede, I'm Gavin Jackson. Be well, South Carolina.
Truly, let's take face and neck out of the equation.
I live under a bridge.